Hey everyone, just got home from a really enjoyable day of commentary with the BBC. Enjoyable because there was so much happening today, not just on track but off track as well, and it's the off track stuff that I just wanted to make a very quick video to clarify some of the points around this Racing Point / Renault protest, of which today we saw the results of the hearing. A 14-page document was released by the FIA in answer to that protest. And I think it's fair to say it's opened up more questions than it's answered. So I thought I'd just quickly come together to clarify some of those points, to explain some of them, most notably how Racing Point have been found guilty and yet are able to continue running the car in the same spec. So just to clarify, the FIA have decided that the front brake ducts on the Racing Point are fine. They're legal, and the main reason for that is that Racing Point were using those last year. They were able to buy them from Mercedes last year. That was perfectly legal. They operated them. They were a perfectly usable component for the Racing Point of last year. The rear brake ducts, which is the other component that was in question with this hearing, was not a component used on last year's Racing Point. The main reason it wasn't used was because the Mercedes brake ducts, in fact the entire Mercedes car last year, was of a very different aerodynamic concept to that of the Racing Point. We all know that most of the grid run this really high rate concept, as Racing Point did last year, whereas Mercedes run a very level aero platform, a car that sits much lower to the ground at the rear of the car. Now this year, with the way that Racing Point have gone in, essentially copying what Mercedes had done for their RP20, they have changed concept. They followed Mercedes in going for that low rate concept. Therefore, the Mercedes brake ducts from last year would now be of benefit or be of available use to the Racing Point because the concept is the same. The Racing Point brake ducts of last year just simply wouldn't have worked on the concept they have run with this year. So the FIA said, front brake ducts, fine. They had access to them. It's absolutely understandable that having seen the brake ducts both inside and out, that knowledge is there. They can't help but have that embedded in their design team. It's understandable that they've come to a very similar conclusion on the front end for this year. They said, though, that last year, given that they were able to buy the CAD drawings, which is what they did from Mercedes, they weren't using them last year. So the only reason they would have used last year's Mercedes CAD data of their brake ducts would be to use those on this year's Racing Point now that they've followed the Mercedes concept. And they have said that that would breach the sporting regulations. There's another key point. They've broken the sporting regs. They haven't broken any technical regs, meaning that the brake ducts that are on this year's Racing Point, the brake ducts that were part or central to this protest from Renault, are a legal component. They don't fall foul of any technical regulations. They're the right size, they're the right shape. There's nothing essentially wrong with those as physical components. Racing Point, though, broke the sporting regulations in the way that they came up with those and utilised them within the concept of their car, and that is what they have done wrong. That is also the reason that the FIA have said it's okay for them to continue using those components because, as standalone parts, they're legal. Are you still with me? This is so confusing on so many different levels, but you can equate it in some way, and this is where all of the other teams at the moment are questioning why this ruling has come about the way it has. How can it be that it's okay to design a component illegally, which the FIA have deemed Racing Point to do, and yet continue to use it unpunished for the rest of the season? It's a little bit like breaking the sporting regulations on wind tunnel use, using more time in the wind tunnel than you're allowed to develop a front wing that goes on to bring you performance to the car. Now, you develop that in an illegal fashion by breaking sporting regulations, but the front wing would absolutely fit in the technical regs and would not be illegal as a component. All of the other teams on the grid now want answers as to how on earth this is deemed to be okay. And if it is okay, why wouldn't every other team take the small financial penalty, €400,000, which was only deemed to be the amount they would have spent if they designed those components themselves, so not really a penalty in itself, and the 15 championship constructors' points? A small price to pay if you can choose a way of designing your cars that will catapult you up the grid and suddenly bring you 15 points over the course of a race or two. if you're in the bottom half of the grid, this now looks like a very appealing way to move forward with your business philosophy within the world of Formula One, and that is the crux of all of this. Should Formula One be looking to move in that direction, where we could end up with half the grid looking to copy a front-running car and take what is seemingly a very small penalty to do so? This is going to rumble on and on. The teams have 24 hours from when that hearing announcement was released this morning to notify them of their intention to appeal, and I will be very surprised if we don't see something over the next few hours to that effect. Really interesting one. It's not going to go away. It's got big philosophical implications as well as the immediate implications about the Racing Point car this weekend. Are there more components that could get protested by teams on the same basis? There is so much to unpick on this, but I'd love to know what your thoughts are. Is this a fair penalty? Should they have been thrown out of the races where they were protested? Should indeed their car be allowed to continue in the championship? Or is this just okay? Have they just done a really good job in mimicking the best car on the grid in the Mercedes, and they should be applauded for that? I'd love to know. Let me know in the comments, and I'll be back very soon over the course of this weekend with more 70th anniversary Grand Prix action.